In an interview with Euronews' new morning show Europe Today, General Ben Hodges, former commanding general of the US Army in Europe, speaking on the war in Ukraine and Europe's safety, warned that the continent is slowly waking to the realization that it cannot count on Washington as a fair partner.
I think Europe and Ukraine, including Ukraine, knows that the United States has a primary interest, which is business with Russia after this is all concluded.
In the general's view, the US administration's approach to the conflict was flawed from the start.
The administration's approach has always been doomed from the start because they didn't care about the origin, they didn't care about the history or the geography involved, and in fact approached it as a massive real estate deal. Secretary Rubio said in the beginning, Ukraine, you're going to have to give up some territory here, before they even started.
This week, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio will skip a key NATO meeting, highlighting Europe's decreasing priority for the US after the Western Hemisphere, Indo-Pacific and likely the Middle East, according to Hodges. But the general remains confident that Europe has the capabilities to defeat Russia's war in Ukraine.
If you add together the industry, the wealth, the populations, the technologies, there's no reason that Europe, including Ukraine, cannot stop Russia. What they lack is the self-confidence and the political will.
According to Hodges, the narrative that Ukraine is losing the war doesn't add up, as Russia's economy is in deep trouble, and in 11 years, Russia has only been able to occupy 20% of Ukrainian territory.
Top Trump administration officials met with Ukrainian negotiators in Florida on Sunday to discuss a peace deal with Russia. The diplomats discussed the 28-point plan and focused on revisions, as the plan has been criticized for being too weighted towards Russian demands. Initially, the plan imposed limits on the size of Ukraine's military, blocked the country from joining NATO, and required Ukraine to hold elections in 100 days. According to local media, the diplomats discussed election timelines and the possibility to exchange territories. However, no details were provided. The head of Ukraine's Security Council, Rustem Umerov, said he remains in constant contact with President Volodymyr Zelensky and that the negotiators are working to secure long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the talks productive and said he expected to yield progress towards reaching a peace deal. The talks with the US come at a critical time for Ukraine as it continues to push back Russian forces while Kyiv is simultaneously dealing with a domestic corruption scandal. Later this week, Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are expected to meet with Russian officials, including Vladimir Putin.
The president of the International Criminal Court said during the institution's annual meeting on Monday that it won't bow to pressure from either the US or Russia. 9 members of its staff, including 6 judges and the court's chief prosecutor, have been sanctioned by US President Donald Trump for pursuing investigations into US and Israeli officials, while Moscow has issued warrants for ICC staff in response to an arrest warrant for President Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. The sanctions have taken their toll on the court's work, affecting a wide range of investigations at a time when it's already struggling with growing demands on its resources.
Swiss citizens have overwhelmingly rejected initiative that planned to tax the super rich and introduce mandatory civic service to women. In a referendum held on Sunday, neither initiative gained even a quarter of the votes needed to go ahead. Critics, including the federal government, warned that such a tax could drive wealthy families and entrepreneurs abroad, ultimately harming the Swiss economy. The initiative planned to use the tax money to fight climate change.
Wie ich bereits im letzten Dezember anlässlich der Verabschiedung der Botschaft erklärt habe, teilt der Bundesrat zwar das grundsätzliche klimapolitische Anliegen der Initiative, er erachtet jedoch die vorgeschlagene Finanzierung der Klimapolitik aus mehreren Gründen als problematisch und auch nicht als zielführend und empfiehlt den Stimmbürgerinnen und Stimmbürgern daher, die Initiative abzulehnen.
Supporters argue that the richest individuals have a disproportionately large carbon footprint and should contribute more to climate solutions.
Popular cryptocurrencies are continuing to struggle as Bitcoin opened the month of December with a 5% drop in value in European trading. The coin currently hovers around 73,500 euros in value, a sharp decline from its estimated value only 24 hours prior, which was just short of 78,000 euros. The digital currency had been in a prolonged and steep decline since reaching its record value of about 110,000 euros in October. The decline is likely attributed to a significant rise in liquidations and sell-offs as holders of the coin look to profit off of their investments. Ethereum, the second largest crypto by market cap, also experienced similar trajectories since its all-time high in November of this year. Other smaller yet well-known and highly traded coins, including Solana, are also continuing their downwards trend.
Greek farmers are escalating their protest against the government, demanding immediate payments of subsidies from OPECP, the agency responsible for distributing EU agricultural subsidies, and protesting the increased production cost alongside low prices of their products. The blockade comes after several people were arrested last week in the spiraling farm fraud case that revealed millions of euros were paid in illegal subsidies by OPECP, a scandal that has provoked farmers and brought extra scrutiny to subsidy payments in Greece. On Sunday, major incidents were reported in central Greece, specifically in the Thessaly region, where farmers managed to break through police blockades and block the critical Athens-Thessaloniki National Highway with tractors. According to an announcement by the Greek National Police, 2 police officers were also injured and 3 arrests were made. With no assurances or statement from the government, the protests are expected to spread across Greece until the 5th of December with more road blockades, a tactic frequently used by farmers to put pressure on the authorities.
On the second leg of his first foreign trip, Pope Leo XIV visited Beirut in a bid to bring hope to Lebanon amid years of successive crises. The pontiff urged Lebanon to begin a new chapter and told the country's leaders that peace must not simply be an aspiration, but a daily necessity. Pope Leo XIV is fulfilling a promise of his predecessor, Pope Francis, who had wanted to visit for years but was unable to as his health worsened. Upon landing in Beirut, the pontiff was greeted by President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. He was also given a grand ceremonial welcome. The Pope had flown over from Turkey, which marked the first leg of his trip. On his flight to Lebanon, Pope Leo XIV reiterated the need for a 2-state solution for Israel and Palestine. The pontiff recognized that Israel does not accept that solution at the time, but said the Vatican can act as a mediating voice in the region.
Authorities in Indonesia on Sunday reported the death toll from floods and landslides in the country has risen to 442 people, as emergency services continue their frantic efforts to access portions of the hardest hit Sumatra Island, where thousands of people were left without essential supplies. According to the National Disaster Management Agency, some 402 people were still missing after initial rescue efforts were hampered by a lack of heavy equipment. While evacuation efforts are underway, officials say that electricity and internet are now partially restored. The devastating floods and landslides came after monsoon rains over the past week caused rivers to burst their banks. The deluge tore through the mountain villages, swept away people, and submerged thousands of houses and buildings in the 3 provinces of North Sumatra, West Sumatra, and Aceh. The devastating floods also affected millions in Malaysia and Thailand, as well as in Sri Lanka, where a state of emergency was declared.
Conservative candidate Nasri Asfoura is edging slightly ahead of his rivals in Honduras' presidential election, according to early preliminary results. The National Election Council says Asfoura of the National Party was leading, securing around 530,000 votes, with 34% of votes counted. The race is turning out to be tightly contested, though, with Liberal candidate Salvador Nasrallah trailing marginally behind, also with just over 500,000. Rixi Moncada, who served as defense minister for the incumbent Liberty and Refoundation, however, appears to have significantly dropped behind.
Candidata Partido Libertad y Refundación Libre, 255.972 votos. Candidato Partido Innovación y Unidad Socialdemócrata, 10.698 votos. Candidato Partido Liberal de Honduras, 506.316 votos. Candidato Partido Nacional de Honduras, 530.073 votos.
Asfoura's success could be in part due to a surprise endorsement announced on Friday by U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump said Asfoura, who had expressed a hardline stance on narco-trafficking, would be the only candidate his administration was willing to work with. The U.S. president also threatened cuts in U.S. aid to Honduras in the event of his loss. The Election Council has up to 30 days to announce the final results. In addition to a new president, Hondurans were also casting their ballots for a new parliament and hundreds of local councilors.